All right, so back together again. We're looking at chapter 16 of Screwtape letters, and as it is our custom and our system here, we listen to John Glees read the audiobook, read the letter from the audiobook. Glees actually did two sittings for the recording of the audiobook for Screwtape letters. And in our past meetings, I put up the tile on the screen so you can see it while we listen to the book, and it is a like a sideways X-ray looking kind of profile of John Glees, and that was on the first book, so that was the cover of the book. But in that book, when they it was for a anniversary for C.S. Lewis when they did that, and they had John omit four letters out of the book. And letter 16 is one of those letters. So in that book, that audiobook, it jumps from letter 15 to letter 17. Now, he came back with their invitation about 10 years later and recorded those missing letters. And they re-released the audiobook unabridged with the missing letters in. And when you listen to it, you can hear the difference because he's a little older and they use different audio equipment to tape him. So it sounds a little bit different. And it's also a little rushed. It sounds like he's in a hurry. So he's a little frenetic in the way that he sounds. But it's still him. Now, I have been up and down and sideways online on YouTube, and I cannot find a single of all. There must be 10 or 12 different audiobook sites with John Cleese reading Screwtape letters, but they're all the abridged book. That nobody has put the unabridged and with the four missing letters in it. So I've had to go outside of our comfort zone, gang, and I'm going to put the audiobook on for you, but this is not John Cleese. I had to choose between somebody who just decided he was going to record this audiobook and just recorded it and sounds like he's reading a milk carton, just like a cardboard, and the only other option is to get a dramatic reading. There's a 2 or 3 presentations of Screwtape in a dramatic reading. So this is the one that I chose that I think is the least dramatic. When you hear this one, you're going to think the least dramatic, but it really is. There are ones that are even way over the top beyond this one. So let's kick off with this. Auden, this should be really interesting for you, but just so you know, this is not our normal fare. This is not what we usually listen to when we do this. So without further ado, folks, let me get this up and running for you so we can see. I don't want to hold you in suspense. All right, so you see the theme music voices in my head? You see that there? All right, here we go.
Letter 16.
All right, let's see what he thinks. Hopefully I'll get some answers here. My dear Wormwood, you mentioned casually in your last letter that the patient has continued to attend one church, and one only, since he was converted, and that he is not wholly pleased with it. May I ask what you are about? Why have I no report on the causes of his fidelity to the parish church? Do you realize that unless it is due to indifference, it is a very bad thing? Surely you know that if a man can't be cured of church-going, the next best thing is to send him all over the neighborhood looking for the church that suits him until he becomes a taster or connoisseur of churches. The reasons are obvious. In the first place, The parochial organization should always be attacked, because being a unity of place and not of likings, it brings people of different classes and psychology together in the kind of unity the enemy desires. The congregational principle, on the other hand, makes each church into a kind of club, and finally, if all goes well, into a coterie or faction. In the second place, the search for a suitable church makes the man a critic, where the enemy wants him to be a pupil. What he wants of the layman in church is an attitude which may indeed be critical in the sense of rejecting what is false or unhelpful, but which is wholly uncritical in the sense that it does not waste time in thinking about what it rejects, but lays itself open in uncommenting, humble receptivity to any nourishment that is going. You see how groveling, how unspiritual, how irredeemably vulgar he is. This attitude, especially during sermons, creates the condition most hostile to our whole policy, in which platitudes can become really audible to a human soul. There is hardly any sermon or any book which may not be dangerous to us if it is received in this temper. So pray bestir yourself, and send this fool the round of the neighboring churches as soon as possible. Your record, up to date, has not given us much satisfaction. The two churches nearest to him I have looked up in the office. Both have certain claims. At the first of these, the vicar is a man who has been so long engaged in watering down the faith to make it easier for a supposedly incredulous and hard-headed congregation that it is now he who shocks the parishioners with his unbelief, not vice versa. He has undermined many a soul's Christianity. His conduct of the services is also admirable. In order to spare the laity all difficulties, he has deserted both the lectionary and the appointed psalms, and now, without noticing it, revolves endlessly round the little treadmill of his 15 favorite psalms and 20 favorite lessons. We are thus safe from the danger that any truth not already familiar to him and to his flock should ever reach them through Scripture. But perhaps your patient is not quite silly enough for this church, or not yet. At the other church we have Father Spike. The humans are often puzzled to understand the range of his opinions. Why, he is one day almost a communist, and the next not far from some kind of theocratic fascism. One day a scholastic, and the next prepared to deny human reason altogether. One day immersed in politics, and the day after declaring that all states of his world are equally under judgment. We, of course, see the connecting link, which is hatred. The man cannot bring himself to preach anything which is not calculated to shock, grieve, puzzle, or humiliate his parents and their friends. A sermon which such people could accept would be to him as insipid as a poem which they could scan. There is also a promising streak of dishonesty in him. We are teaching him to say, "The teachings of the church is," when he really means, "I'm almost sure I read recently in Meritain," or someone of that sort. But I must warn you that he has one fatal defect. He really believes, and this may yet mar all. But there is one good point, which both these churches have in common. They are both party churches. I think I warned you before that if your patient can't be kept out of the church, he ought to at least be violently attached to some party within it. I don't mean on really doctrinal issues. About those, the more lukewarm he is, the better. and it isn't the doctrines in which we chiefly depend for producing malice. The real fun is working up hatred between those who say Mass and those who say Holy Communion, when neither party could possibly state the difference between, say, Hooker's doctrine and Thomas Aquinas's in any form which would hold water for 5 minutes. And all the purely indifferent things, candles and clothes and whatnot, are an admirable ground for our activities. We have quite removed from men's minds what that pestilent fellow Paul used to teach about food and other unessentials, namely that the human without scruples should always give in to the human with scruples. You would think they could not fail to see the application. You would expect to find the low churchman genuflecting and crossing himself, lest the weak conscience of his high brother should be moved to irreverence, and the high one refraining from these exercises, lest he should betray his low brother into idolatry. And so it would have been but for our ceaseless labour. Without that, the variety of usage within the Church of England might have become a positive hotbed of charity and humility. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Okay. That was about as low a bar for a dramatic reading of any of the ones that I've seen. Most of them have music in the background playing and all sorts of fanfare. So if you're reading along, which I hope you were, you can see why this letter was left out of the presentation, because it's about the church, and it seems to insult people who are looking for a church home. So they didn't want to offend anybody when they made Screwtape letters, so they left this and other ones out. So didn't they just do what Screwtape was telling them to do? They're leaving this letter out is exactly what Screwtape would have wanted. And I think they proved the point admirably when they did it. So, all right, let's just start at the beginning. It said, you mentioned casually in your last letter that the patient had continued to attend one church and one church only since he was converted, and that he is not wholly pleased with it. So we have, the seeds of disappointment. It's been a long time in the Christian churches, Presbyterian, Episcopalian, Roman Catholic, Methodist, across the board. Baptist is a great witness to this. That if you're attending somewhere and you don't like the format of the liturgy, or you don't like the voice of the readers, or you don't like the choice of hymns, or whatever it is you get you involved, that you just leave, because there's another one down the road. And so this is attacking the idea that you can stay in one parish. And here especially is Screwtape saying that what we want to do is work on this disappointment as we begin looking at the faith life or the faith tradition of the individual. Let's see, do you know that unless different? Okay, do you realize that unless this due to indifference? So he's saying in this next bit about if the reason why he is displeased with this is based on some real serious reason, that's not good. It needs to be a frivolous reason that he moves on. There can't be a real problem in the church that makes him want to go. It has to be something that is completely subjective and on his part. It has to be an indifference to the way that his faith is being manifest within the context of this community. All right. I like the line where he says, surely don't you know that if a man can't be cured of church going, the next best thing is to send him all over the neighborhood looking for a church that suits him until he becomes a taster or connoisseur of churches. I can't tell you the number of people that have come to Creator over the years, and literally we're like the fourth or fifth on the list, and they've got 3 more. Or they come to me and they say, okay, I've gone to these 4. Can you tell me a couple more to go to? So it is no longer a scandal at all. It's just a normal way of doing things, a normal way of being in the church. Now, again, if the person is doing this for good reasons, for doctrinal reasons, for other reasons that have a real gravity, then that's okay. But if they're doing it because they don't like the color of the carpet,
Well, I feel called out.
what's that?
I feel called out.
That's what Screwtape is really trying to do, trying to hold up the minutia as the reason, a justification why a person should be going. Okay. So he goes on. This is really talking about the parochial institution, as he says in the next paragraph. Is there anything that stood out to you in this letter before I move on? Anything you heard during that reading that caught your ear?
There was for me, and I just wanted clarification on it.
Sure.
Sorry for all the questions.
No, at all. That's why we're here.
There was a part where, and I couldn't pull up the reading. The chat didn't work for me. It's probably a problem on my end. But he said that Screwtape and his letters are wormwood, which, by the way, I feel wormwood. I've had bosses like that. I've been the poor little person on the other end being like, but something about the deceit and the faith, it was towards the middle, I think.
Towards the middle? Let's see.
I think so.
Was he talking about about one of the priests?
I think so, yes.
Let's see. First one was
about how his faith is deceit, or
well, Father Spike, when he talks about it, was he is compromising, although the vicar of the first one really has lost his way completely.
I get it now.
Yeah.
You mentioned that in your sermon this week. I get it now. Okay.
Well, we'll get back there. I mean, I was going to look specifically at the vicar and at Father Spike. I know both of these people. You may have known these people through the years as well. So they're worth looking at and thinking about for a few minutes as we go by. Anybody else? Anybody have a place that they picked out? Anything that stood out for you? All right. Well, if we just go through the letter, and this place where Screwtape starts to talk about the enemy, of course, which is God, and says that the being a unity of place and not of likings. This is a great thing. Being a unity of place and not of likings, it brings people of different classes and psychology together in a kind of unity the enemy desires. So this is a really important to always think about. It's a unity of place, which means that's actually a phrase that C.S. Lewis uses in several of his books, that the church is a place where people are unified. It's a place that is a hub that is unlike anybody else's hub. So when you go to church, it doesn't look like your house. When you go to church, it doesn't look like the VFW. It doesn't look like, the community center. The church is unlike any other place that you would go to. So nobody can claim the church as a place, as their place, like their place. It's a place unlike their place. And so it becomes a place of unity because it's unique. So there's nobody can claim it any more than anybody else. And this way you have people of different and varying backgrounds and likes and dislikes all coming together for something bigger than the likeness of the place. I'm not simply coming to it because it has beautiful purple curtains and great carpet and it looks just like my place. It may not have any of that. I'm coming to it for a bigger reason than this. So he's saying this is what we want to make sure that we keep away from the mind of the people. We want them to like the place. We want them to look at the place and like the carpet and like the wall and like the things about it and the pews and the wood and all that stuff, and focus their attention on that, which is transitory and fleeting, and not on the word that they're hearing or the Bible that they're or the sacrament that they're receiving or the community that they're in, even the community. This way they can leave. They can just go because they can find those same things someplace else in some other form, or if they don't, because their focus is not on the true purpose of the church, but rather on their comfort in it, they can just go to the next place, which may be very different, and just apply the same rules again. And keep doing that over and over and over again. He says, in the second place, the search for a suitable church makes the man a critic, which the enemy wants him where the enemy wants him to be a pupil. So I don't know if you've ever done this, but I have been on vacation in the pew. In fact, it was up in Massachusetts a few years ago. I sat down with the family, with another family in front of us and to the right. And during the entire service, the father and the mother, the husband and the wife, were critiquing everything. This was their church. This wasn't, they weren't visitors. This was their church. They spent the entire time, going, oh, look at her. Look at the way she's standing. Look, isn't he supposed to stand there? He's not supposed to stand like that. All through the service. I mean, I was so distracted. I actually asked Jenny at the piece if she wanted to move before we got into the Eucharist because it was so distracting. So this is what he's saying right out of Screwtape, that make everybody a critic. Make them more focused. This is just like the unity of place comment. Make them more focused on what they see that doesn't match, what they see they don't like, what they see that they have a better idea of the way it should be. Focus in on that. And while they focus in on that, they're going to miss what's really important. They're not going to be engaged in what the real purpose of the church is all about. So it says, okay, it goes down, you see. The attitude, especially during sermons, creates this condition, most hostile to repulsing, in which the platitudes can become really audible in the human soul. There is hardly any sermon or any book which may not be dangerous to us if it is received in this temper. So again, he's saying, don't let them listen to the sermon, to the meat of it. Let them critique the delivery. And while they're critiquing the delivery, they're missing the words. They're missing the point. And so by the time the sermon gets done, the only thing that they've heard is that they'll talk about how they didn't like the way it was too long, it was too short, it was too loud, it was too quiet, whatever it was about it that they didn't like, but they did not get the message at all. So Screwtape's saying, go there, get that. That's the place we want them. And then he goes into this to the first one. He says, the two churches near him both have certain claims. The vicar is a man who has been so long engaged in watering down the faith to make it easier for a supposedly incredulous and hard-headed congregation that it is now he who shocks the parishioners with his unbelief. He has undermined many a soul's Christianity. His conduct and his service are so admirable, that's to them. In order to spare the laity all difficulties, he has deserted both the lectionary and the appointed psalms, and now without noticing it revolves endlessly around a little treadmill of his own 15 favorite psalms and 20 favorite lessons. So this is much harder to do in the Episcopal Church, but it's easy to do in the Anglican Church in England. That we used to call it a sermon series. And in the Episcopal Church, before my time, it really became to do a sermon series outside of the lectionary, you had to get permission from the bishop. But in England, you don't have to do that. You can decide that for the next 18 weeks, you're going to basically do a sermon, a Bible study, sermon study, revolving around these 5 or 6 lessons the whole time. So it sounds noble, but what it amounts to is a lot less engagement by the clergy.
That was lazy.
Yeah, it really is. It's lazy. I met in my time in the church, mostly they were gone now, the older clergy that lived were in churches before I came along and remembered fondly doing sermon series where they would, they could write their series in 1 week and then stretch it out for 10 weeks. And they do it during the long green season, maybe. Or I remember one person who did a sermon series through Lent, just because he didn't want to get into all of the nitty gritty that Lent brings with it. He did something else completely. So
it sounds a bit like in school when they asked you to write an essay, we say the great big blue dog with floppy.
Yeah. It's a way, like I think what Alan said is great. It's lazy. This picture of this vicar, very, very sad. A vicar is just a priest in charge of a mission. It's a vicar at a mission, it's a rector at a parish. So I have known priests that fit both in these categories, the vicar and Father Spike, that have become over time jaded or disillusioned or resentful or just tired. And they're looking for ways to get out of the work that they do or the service that they're doing or the relationship that they have with the Lord and preaching and teaching it in the parish. It goes on with Father Spike. Humans are often puzzled to understand a range of his opinions. One day he's a communist, then day a fascist. And he goes on, he says the connection between all this is hatred. So this person is obviously disappointed. He's become disappointed and is finding the excitement of his life in the process of shocking other people or making them feel uncomfortable. And then can claim the high road, kind of a highbrow. I know you feel uncomfortable about this. Of course, I have the answer. That kind of thing. So it's it's engaging. When I was in the Diocese of Washington, there's a parish. It's St. Paul's. I think it's on K Street. And when I was in there, it's a beautiful little stone Gothic parish. And I was sitting in the pews on the left side, and the priest came out of the side door, transept door, and he turned and went into a door right there. And I noticed that when he went in that door, everybody in the pews leaned over to look in the door. And when the service was over, I asked the people I was with, I said, because after he was the priest was in there for like 10 minutes and then came out. When he came out, everybody leaned over real quick. I said, what was all that? And they said, oh, that's the priest's special room. It's a special room. And the priest goes, once in a while, he'll bring in another priest or a lector in there, and they go in there, and it's it's like a sanctum. And we don't know what's in there. It's a special place, a holy place. But we don't know what's in. That's why everybody's looking.
It's the Bat Cave.
Yeah. So I said, really? So you've never been in there? Like, oh no, you can't go in there. You never go in there. I mean,
So go in there.
yeah, you can't. Only the priest will let you go in there. I mean, that would be terrible to go in there without being asked. And I said, okay. So
now I'm curious.
Everybody went to coffee hour, and I went to coffee hour, and about a third of the way through coffee hour, I had to use the restroom, and I did, which is right across the little hallway, and I decided I'm close.
What's in there?
I went back in the church and a little knock, make sure nobody's hiding in this super room, and opened the door and looked inside, and it was about as big as maybe like a master bathroom, maybe 10 by 12, maybe not that big, 8 by 10. Had a little bookshelf on the side, had a wing chair and another chair and a little table and a lamp, and that was about it. It was just a little room.
Little sitting room.
Nothing at all. Nothing at all. It was where the priest went. I'm sure that he wanted to be left alone, and this little room had become such a mystique that he could go in there and know that once he closed that door, nobody would come and knock on it. Nobody would come and get him. So when I went back out, I talked to my colleagues, my friends, and I said, "What?" I went and looked at it, and they go, "Oh no, you didn't."
Oh my God.
I told them. I said, "Yes, I did." I said, "The problem with this is that there is a real mystery that is available to everybody in the church. There's a real place where your heart and your mind should be thrilled and long to look through this door, this spiritual door. And we should be longing and coming to the place of the Eucharist, the Mass, and just peering through at the spiritual revelation that we could receive in doing this. And what a disservice it is to that parish that the priest has encouraged their focus and their curiosity not to be on the Eucharist or the Mass, not to be on the spiritual life that is being made known to them through the Scripture, but rather on this little room. Completely moving their focus to a place that's dead, complete dead end. Nothing at all, but it's the only thing it is titillating. It's just some place where I get all, I can talk about it with people in a little room, instead of the Eucharist, instead of the Mass, or instead of the Scripture. So it's the same thing with Father Spike here. He's really looking, he is using different topics and different things to shock the people, to focus them on it, instead of, it's a diversion from what they should be focused on. But see, it's easier for him. He doesn't have to preach on the mystery of the Eucharist. He doesn't have to preach on the connection that people have with the Holy Spirit. He doesn't have to preach on the Trinity. He doesn't have to preach on things that are difficult to wrap our heads around and require a spiritual investment on the individual. He is doing just surface level to cause a big splash and a lot of noise, and then move on. So I know these people. I know people like this. So very sad, very sad. But he does have one redeeming quality, right? He really believes. So he's actually a believer. So that's a good thing. There's still hope for him, right? This thing about parties in the church, the Church of England has always had the high and low parties, and it's going to come up in Screwtape later on. It's just, think of liturgy. It's just high liturgical tradition and low liturgical tradition. That's why he goes into this thing about the low brother and the high brother, knocking each other off, keeping each other off balance, saying, I don't know if you guys had this in your lifetime, but in my lifetime, there was an argument or a dissension in the church about people who would come in and genuflect. People come in the church and cross themselves. And other people in the church would go, look at that. What is he doing over there? We don't do that here. I vividly remember a lady in church going, we don't do that here. It's like, oh,
That was a thing.
Yeah.
That was a thing. I feel so young.
Oh, it makes you wonder why anybody would even consider. Why would somebody even say that? We don't do that here. Like, I'm sure that the lady that said that doesn't even know what the person's doing. It's just that it's an action that they don't, because they don't understand it, they don't do it, they don't partake of it. And because they don't understand it and they don't partake of it, they are jealous of this person doing it and they don't think they should. Again, really what this whole chapter is about is I like this phrase, your emphasis is on the wrong syllable, right? The emphasis here is in the wrong place all the way through this chapter. And the person that's losing through all this is the patient. He's not going to find the clarity, the spiritual clarity and focus to continue on in his spiritual life and spiritual development if this is the road he's going down. He'll be in the church for 30 years and he'll just be in the same place when he leaves that he started it. So he ends up with
what does he mean by it? Like, why are all these things coming from hatred? That didn't, when they read the description of Father Spike, it didn't sound like hatred. I'm just not following that.
I think that what Lewis was looking at here is that I don't know if I'd use the word hatred. I think that after reading this for years and years, it's the better word would be the disdain. He has a disdain, a discomfort, but it's not just, it's not one of those feelings where I just don't like it. There is an energy behind not liking it, even to the place of an irritation. So I think Lewis used the word hatred, and I think disdain is a better word in the way that I've read it through the years. It makes sense when you think
That
about
makes better sense. Yeah.
I like the references between Hooker and Aquinas. You caught that? You know, Hooker, he wrote a book called The Laws of Ecclesiastical Polity. That's a real read, let me tell you. It's a lot of fun, but in it he really talks about the spiritual impact of the Eucharist. And then, of course, Aquinas talks about the spiritual impact of the Eucharist, of the Mass. So he's saying, you know, you'd have to hold these things side by side, but who can do that? You know, you have these disagreements, but you don't really know what you're talking about. And it's a waste of time and energy. All right. All right, that's good. How'd you like that? Was that a good one?
The whole letter to me, it seemed like the Screwtape was just very disappointed in Wormwood and just giving it to him the entire letter.
Yeah. He's
Especially right off the top, he's like, I'm not very pleased with you. What's your problem?
I think that Wormwood is Screwtape is looking at Wormwood like he's going to miss the mark here. He's not going to put.
Afraid he's going to fail in his mission.
Mission. He's missing the wrong emphasis. He's letting the opportunities slide by.
There's a different tone to this letter than all the others so far.
Yeah. It'll come back. Let's see what time it is. I think we have.
I didn't care for the narration either. I'm just going to put that out there.
I didn't either. I hated it. I really did.
At the risk of being contrarian, I actually found it really helpful for me.
Oh, good. Well, I hope that we're going to do one more and see how you see it juxtaposed to John Cleese doing it.
I'm sure John Cleese is better. He's John Cleese.
So here, I'm looking right at it. It says 15 and then 17. So we will look at letter 17. All right, you ready? Let's see, got that.
Letter 17. My dear Wormwood, the contemptuous way in which you spoke of gluttony as a means of catching souls in your last letter shows only your ignorance. One of the great achievements of the last 100 years has been to deaden the human conscience on that subject, so that by now you will hardly find a sermon preached or a conscience troubled about it in the whole length and breadth of Europe. This has largely been effected by concentrating all our efforts on gluttony of delicacy, not gluttony of excess. Your patient's mother, as I learned from the dossier, and you might have learned from Glubose, is a good example. She would be astonished, one day I hope will be, to learn that her whole life is enslaved to this kind of sensuality, which is quite concealed from her by the fact that the quantities involved are small. But what do quantities matter, provided we can use a human belly and palate to produce querulousness, impatience, uncharitableness, and self-concern? Glubose has this old woman well in hand. She is a positive terror to hostesses and servants. She is always turning from what she's been offered to say with a demure little sigh and a smile. Oh, please, please, all I want is a cup of tea, weak, but not too weak, and the teeniest, weeniest bit of really crisp toast, you see? Because what she wants is smaller and less costly than what has been set before her, she never recognizes as gluttony her determination to get what she wants, however troublesome it may be to others. At the very moment of indulging her appetite, she believes that she is practicing temperance. In a crowded restaurant, she gives a little scream at the plate which some overworked waitress has set before and says, oh, that's far, far too much. Take it away and bring me about a quarter of it. If challenged, she would say she was doing this to avoid waste. In reality, she does it because the particular shade of delicacy to which we have enslaved her is offended by the sight of more food than she happens to want. The real value of the quiet, unobtrusive work which Glubose has been doing for years on this old woman can be gauged by the way in which her belly now dominates her whole life. The woman is in what may be called the all I want state of mind. All she wants is a cup of tea properly made, or an egg properly boiled, or a slice of bread properly toasted. But she never finds any servant or any friend who can do these simple things properly, because her properly conceals an insatiable demand for the exact and almost impossible palatal pleasures which she imagines she remembers from the past, a past described by her as the days when you could get good servants, but known to us as the days when her senses were more easily pleased, and she had pleasures of other kinds which made her less dependent on those of the table. Meanwhile, the daily disappointment produces daily ill temper. Cooks give notice, and friendships are cooled. If ever the enemy introduces into her mind a faint suspicion that she is too interested in food, Glubose counters it by suggesting to her that she doesn't mind what she eats herself, but does like to have things nice for her boy. In fact, of course, her greed has been one of the chief sources of his domestic discomfort for many years. Now, your patient is his mother's son. While working your hardest, quite rightly, on other fronts, you must not neglect a little quiet infiltration in respect of gluttony. Being a male, he is not so likely to be caught by the all-I-want camouflage. Males are best turned into gluttons with the help of their vanity. They ought to be made to think themselves very knowing about food, to pique themselves on having found the only restaurant in the town where steaks are really properly cooked. What begins as vanity can then be gradually turned into habit. But however you approach it, the great thing is to bring him into the state in which the denial of any one indulgence, it matters not which, champagne or tea, Sol Colbert or cigarettes, puts him out, for then his charity, justice, and obedience are all at your mercy. Mere excess in food is much less valuable than delicacy. Its chief use is as a kind of artillery preparation for attacks on chastity. On that, as on every other subject, keep your man in a condition of false spirituality. Never let him notice the medical aspect. Keep him wondering what pride or lack of faith has delivered him into your hands, when a simple inquiry into what he's been eating or drinking for the last 24 hours would show him whence your ammunition comes, and thus enable him by a very little abstinence to imperil your lines of communication. If he must think of the medical side of chastity, feed him the grand lie which we have made the English humans believe, that physical exercise in excess and consequent fatigue are specially favorable to this virtue. How they can believe this in face of the notorious lustfulness of sailors and soldiers may well be asked. But we use the schoolmasters to put the story about men who were really interested in chastity as an excuse for games, and therefore recommended games as an aid to chastity. But this whole business is too large to deal with at the tail end of a letter. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Lovely. So I wonder if you've ever thought about gluttony from this perspective before.
No, not until I read this the first time.
They talked about it to us in Catholic school quite a bit.
Really?
hmm I, of course, immediately forgot that knowledge when I left, but they talked about it quite a bit.
Okay, that's good. That's really, really good. Yeah, so the definition of gluttony that we most think about is, and we usually think about it around food, right? A glutton is somebody who eats and eats and eats and eats. I don't recommend this movie, so please don't rush out and see it if you have not seen it. But being a Monty Python fan, I think the last movie that they made was The Meaning of Life. So has anybody seen The Meaning of Life?
I tried to watch it once.
Well,
Been a while, but I've seen some of it too.
in The Meaning of Life, I think it's it also goes in sections, and I think it's section 3 is about gluttony. It's 100% about gluttony, and it concerns this man who's probably 7 feet around. He's just this huge caricature of a man. What people don't realize about Monty Python was that they were extremely astute. These guys were not fools at all. They were extremely astute, and a lot of their humor is very sophisticated. So this whole section of the meaning of life is very sophisticated and gives a real look into the British way of thinking, not of humor, but it's a critique on the British culture and society. So generally, yeah.
My dad's gonna love you.
Oh.
Sorry.
So we often think of gluttony as an excess of stuff, whereas Screwtape is showing that gluttony is really an excess of anything. So he's saying here it's an excess of less. My gluttony is taking in constantly more of the less that I want. So this woman, like he's saying, she's always about getting less than she's receiving. So it's not the amount of stuff that she's taking in, the food. It is the less the thing she's taking in at a greater portion. So she is more, once in a while, I send things back to the kitchen when I'm at a restaurant. Anybody do that? Am I the only?
I mean, if it's gonna kill me,
Yeah, I'm not that picky, right? But if something is obviously not right, like the meal is obviously, this is just something's wrong with it. Not like he's saying like, your steak isn't just perfect. I would never do that. But if something's obviously just wrong with the meal, I'll send it back. Drives Jenny crazy. She just can't stand that. It's like, no, don't do it. But imagine if I did that with every meal, where I wasn't trying to be mean. I just, there was just this problem with this, and this is just a problem with it. I just wanted to be right, and I want the chef to know, so the chef can do a better job because I'm supporting the chef. So this would be the kind of gluttony we're staying in the realm of food that Screwtape is talking about, that Lewis is talking about. It is anything that I am doing in excess for myself. It feeds me. It feeds this woman to only want this little bit of food, properly prepared, properly given, properly at what time, properly. So there is a gluttony because it's a consumption of this little thing. So gluttony can be in anything. Gluttony is not just about food. It can be in any area of our life. It is an excess, but it can be an excess of less. I don't want that. Oh, don't take any. How about something? I mean, I don't want to pick on anybody, but you have anybody in your life that will not accept a gift?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
And they won't do it for all the right reasons. They'll tell you, oh, no, I don't, they don't want to, but they won't let you give them one. And their posture with it is just that they're so sweet and, oh, I really don't have to do it. Oh, well, Lewis would say that's a gluttony, that they're being fed by this, even though they're not getting something, they're not collecting things. Their gluttony is the control that they have, is controlling the encounter, controlling the environment, controlling the thing, and they're going to do that in a very, happy way, affirming way, but they're going to have that. So this gluttony is really anything in our realm that we collect and hold on to en masse. It doesn't have to be food. So it's got a whole other way of looking at gluttony, which is very biblical, actually. It's not, gluttony is one of the 7 deadly sins. And when
I remember this, this letter very well. I just think about it all the time for some reason. But it's also more than gluttony. It's very selfish, all about me.
Yeah.
And an ego.
In a way that she's thinking that it's making it sound like it's not about her.
Right. Thank
Yeah,
you.
look at me. I'm only eating this tiny little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at me.
Look at me doing this.
How hard, if I've prepared food and I've done everything, and now you say that's not good enough.
Yeah.
I have to have this piece of toast. Now I got to go fix you a piece of toast.
Right.
when I've got this whole spread that should be, you should be able to find something here that you can eat.
Right.
And, it's just made me always feel like, regardless of my diet or whatever I'm eating, when I go somewhere, I eat what they serve.
Yeah.
If that's what's served, that's what I'm going to eat, whether I like it or not. I mean, it just is, that's like, it's a hospitality kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to turn down your hospitality or say, oh, this isn't, even if I want less, or even if I want something less fattening or less sugary or less whatever, that's not what's being served.
Yeah.
And one thing I did get out of the letters, and I really appreciate your insight. I totally agree with you, Catherine. But it seemed to me to be saying that, because it's less, you don't, let me think the best way to put this. Sometimes, like, being a battering ram is not necessarily the best way to tempt someone to the other side. Sometimes you need to be a lot more subtle. So, sure, she's not like, I'm going to eat all this food, which is like the battering ram way, but she's like, no, I'm just doing this little thing for a good reason. And that's a lot more insidious than ever,
Mhm. Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
It makes, in fact, if you think about it, like, it makes the person that you're talking to feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
And since you only want something so easy to do, like Catherine said, you just want a piece of toast, then who would say no to that? I mean, who would say, oh, I'm not going to get you a piece of toast. So it sounds so nice. It sounds so simple. And yet you can see how it affects everybody. And the person, like you say, it's like what Catherine's saying, it's all about her. It's all coming back to her. It's really not, it's not taking it easy on anybody. It's collecting the service and everything to herself.
And the attention of, look what I'm eating.
Yep.
I'm only eating this toast.
I like the hook that he puts into the men at the bottom, Alan. I know you and I both know. In fact, everybody knows the guys always know where the best restaurant is, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'll tell people when they come into town, I say, do you like Thai food? Oh, yeah, I know a Thai food, the Thai place down here, you got to go to it. And I got turned on to that Thai place by Don LaFoon.
So you don't
like
happen
Thai
to be able
food?
to see it from your church, can you?
Yeah, what's that?
You aren't able to see it from your church, are you?
No, it's not that one.
Still pretty good though.
It's good. I like the gosh, I just lost the name of it. It's over on Meadowbridge.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to go there.
Past the hospital. Pad Thai. It's Pad Thai.
Oh, they're good. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's I knew somebody a little while ago who would go to the carpet arguing with you if you said that he had the best burger joint and you said, oh, that's really great. Have you been to this one over here? And he never stopped smiling, but he would exhaust you within a few minutes of telling you subtly how much better the one that he's talking about is than the one that you're talking about, even though he'd never been to the one that you're talking about. And you learn pretty quickly that he really wasn't talking about the burgers. He was talking about that it's his opinion that that's the best place and that you should be agreeing with him and obeying his direction to go eat there.
Because I said so. Because it's my opinion and I said so.
Yeah.
Because I'm right and you're wrong.
Well, no, the reason why is because he just wants you to have a good meal. See, he's looking out for you, right?
He's doing this for you. It's all about you.
It's all
Not
about
him. Not about him at all.
Yeah, it's all about you, just so long as you do what I say, right? So he was. I learned pretty quickly. I learned pretty quickly not to have any talks about where we're going to eat with him. Seriously, don't even. I just like bad place to go. And now I will say he was encyclopedic. I had never known anybody, and I probably never will again, that knew so many different restaurants with so many different types of food. And he knew the best one in every single category.
Those people scare me.
Yes, I remember once Jenny told me to call him and ask him, which restaurant. I'm like, there's no way,
I don't have 30 minutes for that.
no way in the world I'm going to call and find out about a restaurant. All
Park will
right.
be closed time we get there. It'll take so
Yeah,
long to talk
yeah.
about it.
Horrible. And lastly, it ends up with this comment about remember now that he says this line, mere excess in food is much less valuable than delicacy. And he talks about this conditioning of false spirituality. I think that false spirituality is exactly what I'm talking about with this man who knows the best thing for everything, but it's just for you. The reason why he's doing it is because he wants you to have a good meal. And sadly, with the woman that's being described here and the man that's being described here that I'm describing, the commonality here is that they can't see this in themselves. They think that what they're doing is good. She thinks that she is being a good person and not eating too much or abusing the food that she's receiving. He thinks that he's being a good person by being the guardian of the restaurants and by getting you to a place that's good to eat. He personally unaware, oblivious to the reality of what they are, how they're behaving and what they're acting like. So it's a pretense that they can't see in themselves. And what, of course, Screwtape is saying, we want to keep this going as much as possible. Build this up so that they are, now think about this according to the last chapter. Keep them in this place where all that they can see is their own thing, but they make excuses for their own thing as not being selfish or self-centered or self-focused. It's for somebody else. It's for the right. I tell this joke once in a while when I'm with people who will understand it, and we see something, and something comes up in a group, and they say, why do they put it like that? That doesn't make any sense. And I say, well, it's because they didn't ask me. If they'd asked me, it wouldn't be like that. It'd be perfect, right? And I'm not being snide to them, but my point is that it's easier to stand back here and make a criticism about that thing over there than is to appreciate it. That's done, and that's good. Done is better. Let's be happy that it's done. All right, let's see. Too large a business to enter in at the tail end of a letter. That's a great phrase to remember. In fact, next time you write a letter to somebody, just put it on the end of your letter with no reference to anything else. Just write it in there and say goodbye and wait for them to return your letter with what they say. It's pretty amusing. I've done it a few times. They try to figure out desperately what it is they missed in the letter. And it's amazing what people will sometimes come up with. So, all right. I think that's good. We got through 2. 6.
Well, you didn't talk about what you mentioned before that, though.
What's that?
Well, there's 2 things, which is, I'm not really sure what understand the second sentence. Like the first is the physical excess and how that's
yes.
kind of idolized instead of understanding. Like so Alex's girlfriend said her father used to work out like 8 hours a day.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and that is insane. Anybody who could possibly think that is good,
Right.
is just clearly not thinking.
You need professional help.
Yeah.
Right.
That doesn't even sound healthy, to be honest.
No.
Right, exactly. It's not healthy. I mean, you're spending your life on exercise. It's just dumb.
Right.
Anyway, but I'm not sure I understand what that means. How they can believe this in the face of the notorious lustfulness of sailors and soldiers may well be asked. What does that mean?
What?
What does that mean? I'm just not sure what that means.
Well, this is remember, this is during a period of time where you have there's a mythology about about people in the service, men in the service going places and indulging themselves in ways that they should not. And
Yeah.
it's a myth. it's a myth that is, it's not a truth. So he's saying in here that you have, if he must think of medical side chastity, feed him grand lie. Okay, if he must think of the medical side of chastity, feed him the grand lie, which we have made the English humans believe that physical exercise in excess and consequent fatigue are especially favorable and a virtue, right? So you want, like you said, I want to be overextended. I want to be worn out. I want to be in the gym for 8 hours because that's the best thing. And I'm the best person because I do these things. That's great.
Yeah.
And then you have this, how they can believe this in the face of notorious lustfulness of sailors and soldiers, we may well be asked. Some of the mythology that went behind that was that the sailors and soldiers that indulge themselves wound up not in a good place in their career, in their manner of life, the reputation wasn't good. The reputation was bad. It was something that you'd brag about, but it wasn't something that would carry you. So you don't want to have one, it doesn't stand up next to this other myth that, is perpetuated by the sailor and the indulgent. Think about service members all over the world that have this
Yeah.
idea. But back here, it was much more clinical in that it wasn't a time of internet and television. It was.
It just doesn't compare to physical exercise to me, I guess. I'm just trying to.
Well, it's much too big a business to tack on the end of a letter. So it's touched on. He'll get back to it a little bit as we move on farther into in fact, he makes references in the letters as we move where he talks about, we mentioned this before, and then carries on with a bigger explanation of it.
Yeah.
So it will come back.
Okay.
It will come back around. All right, guys. Thank you so much. And Auden, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Hope you didn't get scared away with Screwtape and
No, I'm about to call my dad and discuss, like,
good.
hey, Dad.
Well, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Like I said, anytime you get there, 10, 11, doesn't matter. I will just be working away.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. All right,
right.
guys. God bless
Yeah.
you all. Have a wonderful night. Sleep well.
Stay warm.
Bye.
Bye,
Good
y'all.
night.
Enjoy the snow if you get any. Bye, Mom.
Bye.